In a quiet town nestled between two mountains, old tales whispered of a ghost called the Silent Wanderer. This ghost wasn't like any other. He wasn't visible at first. The townsfolk believed he lived in shadows cast by lanterns on the winding streets, appearing only when someone walked alone on a moonless night. They called him Silent, yet his presence was felt in eerie ways. A cold shiver, the sensation of a hand resting lightly on the shoulder, or the faint echo of footsteps behind. As time passed, strange things began to happen. Children claimed to see strange reflections in windows, fleeting glimpses of a man in an old cloak. One elderly woman, renowned for her wisdom and half-blindness, whispered to those who would listen that the Silent Wanderer wasn't just a restless spirit. He was something far darker, a keeper of old, cursed secrets. She warned that he knew the darkest desires and fears of the living, and he could bend them to his will. One evening, a group of friends dared each other to walk the town's oldest street, the one where the Silent Wanderer was most often seen. They laughed it off as an old legend and set out, confident that they'd return with nothing more than a chilling story to tell. As they walked, the fog thickened unnaturally, swallowing up the moon's faint light. The silence grew oppressive, and one by one, they felt his presence, the cold pressing in, the shadows deepening. One of them glanced over his shoulder, catching sight of a figure, dim and blurred, moving silently toward them, as if floating on the mist. His face was obscured, yet his eyes, dark as night, seemed to pierce through the fog, locking onto each of them with a knowing gaze. A sharp cry broke out, and when the others looked, one of their friends was gone, his footsteps leading off into the darkness. They frantically searched, but he had vanished without a trace. Days turned into weeks, and he was never found. The Silent Wanderer was now known as more than a shadow. He was a taker of souls. People whispered that he had claimed their friend, perhaps adding him to his ranks, and the children of the town began seeing not one, but asterisk to asterisk figures in the fog, drifting just beyond reach, their silence heavy with secrets no living soul should hear. As the years wore on, the story of the Silent Wanderer and his mysterious companion grew into legend. The townsfolk spoke of them with a fearful reverence, cautioning all to avoid the old street at night. Yet, the story seemed to draw the curious and the desperate alike, people hoping to glimpse the unknown or confront the ghostly figures and somehow find answers. One such person was Helena, the sister of the boy who had vanished. She returned to the town after many years, her face hardened by grief and sleepless nights. She didn't come back for family or memories. She returned for a single purpose: to confront whatever spirit had stolen her brother and make it give him back. Night after night, she waited alone on the old street, lantern in hand. Whispering into the darkness, she pleaded with the Silent Wanderer to reveal himself, to let her see her brother just once more. One night, when the moon hung low and full, Helena felt the fog draw close, colder than she'd ever felt. She turned, her heart racing, and saw not one, but three figures cloaked in shadows. The Silent Wanderer was there, and beside him, her brother stood, his eyes empty and unseeing, as if lost in a dream. But the third figure was even more unsettling, a slender, shrouded form whose eyes gleamed with something altogether different from the rest. The figure stepped forward, its gaze locking with Helena's. Its voice was soft, almost hypnotic, weaving into her mind like a haunting melody. It whispered to her of ancient secrets, forbidden knowledge, and the truth of the Silent Wanderer. The third figure promised her something no living soul could refuse: the ability to enter the shadowed realm herself and perhaps, if she were brave enough, reclaim her brother. But there was a cost. To enter the world of shadows, Helena would have to abandon her life in the world of the living. She would have to become a part of the fog, forever tied to the old street, bound by a fate neither she nor her brother could escape. Desperation clawed at her heart, and she found herself reaching out, her hand just inches from the third figure's. The Silent Wanderer watched, his face unreadable, as if he had seen the same moment play out countless times before. The mist thickened around them, and Helena knew she had to choose. In the silence, she felt a shiver of realization. Perhaps this was why the Silent Wanderer kept wandering, bound not by a curse, but by choice. As the fog deepened and the world around her began to blur, Helena had one fleeting, dreadful thought: Asterisk, what if the third figure wasn't offering a choice at all? Asterisk, the next morning, no one saw Helena again. But from that night on, those who dared venture onto the old street claimed they saw a fourth shadow new, restless, with a silent, anguished gaze, forever lingering beside the wanderer and his companion. And some say, if you listen closely on a moonlit night, you can hear Helena's soft whispers on the breeze, warning others to stay away, lest they do become part of the shadow's ranks. Yet, there was still something unresolved, something lingering in the fog, the identity of the third figure, and why it kept adding to the silent wanderer's mournful procession remained shrouded in mystery, leaving a dreadful silence that echoed through the old town, hinting at a darkness that was far from finished. As years passed, rumors of the old street grew darker. A few daring souls began speaking of a deeper mystery of forgotten connection between the silent wanderer, the third figure, and the missing townspeople. Some whispered that the town itself was cursed, a haven for lost souls bound by an ancient promise none could remember. One stormy night, a stranger arrived. He was a historian, known for studying cursed towns and ghostly phenomena. His journals filled with cryptic symbols and stories of haunted places. He traveled across the country to uncover the truth behind the silent wanderer, drawn by whispers of the mysterious third figure who ensnared others in the fog. He visited the old woman who still remembered the original story of the silent wanderer. When he questioned her, she looked at him with hollow eyes, whispering, "It's not just a spirit that haunts our town, but a broken oath, a pact made long ago by a man who loved more than he feared death." Intrigued, the historian delved into the town's archives, buried deep beneath the church. There he discovered yellowed pages of a diary written by a man named Elias Crane, a doctor and healer who had lived in the town centuries earlier. The entries were fragmented, filled with strange symbols and faded ink, but one passage stood out, dated on the night Elias supposedly died. Underscore, to save her from death's grasp, I must give myself to the shadows. I offer my soul, a pact with the Fogbringer, who promised she would be safe, and I would be bound, forever, if need be. Underscore, the historian felt a chill as he read the words. He flipped through the pages, each entry revealing Elias's descent into madness as he spoke of a mysterious figure he called the Fogbringer. Elias claimed the Fogbringer was not a ghost, but an ancient entity that could weave souls into shadows, binding them for eternity. Realizing that the silent wanderer was once Elias Crane, the historian was left with a horrifying question. Was Helena now bound to this ancient pact as well? And was there a way to break the curse that tied these souls to the Fogbringer? Determined to know the truth, he decided to stay one night on the old street, carrying Elias's diary and a lantern that flickered in the relentless wind. As midnight drew near, the fog thickened, and he sensed a presence, a cold, lingering shadow slipping just beyond his reach. He gripped the diary tightly, calling out, "Elias Crane, show yourself. I know your story." For a moment, nothing stirred, but then, out of the mist, a figure appeared. The silent wanderer's face was worn with sorrow, his eyes dull with centuries of longing. Behind him, Helena's shadow flickered, her hand reaching out, as if pleading for release. But before he could move, the third figure emerged, a wraith-like presence with eyes as dark as the void. It was the Fogbringer, ancient and terrible, her gaze heavy with the weight of secrets only the dead could understand. She fixed her gaze on the historian, a slow, knowing smile spreading across her face. In a voice like silk and smoke, she whispered, "You have come to meddle in what is mine." He stumbled back, his heart racing as he realized the Fogbringer had no intention of letting him leave. Her whispers filled his mind, promises of knowledge, of power, of glimpses beyond mortal understanding if only he would join her. Yet, he could feel the silent wanderer's warning stare, as if pleading for him to resist. Caught in a web of shadow and silence, the historian faced an impossible choice: abandon his quest for knowledge or risk joining the souls, bound to the fog for eternity. He glanced once more at Elias's diary, wondering if it held any hint, any spell that could break the Fogbringer's grip. The fog grew thicker, wrapping around him as he felt his will slipping. His last thought, before everything went dark, was a single, haunting question. Asterisk how many more would be drawn to the silent wanderer's fate before the curse was finally broken. Asterisk the next morning, his lantern was found flickering on the old street, with the diary lying open to a blank page, as if waiting for a new story to be written. And those who walked the street at night began to see a fifth shadow among the figures, forever wandering, searching, and bound to the secrets of the Fogbringer's eternal grasp. Yet, some believed the historian had left a clue in the diary's final pages, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the one who could break the curse and free the silent wanderer's sorrowful procession, once and for all. But who would be brave or foolish enough to try? Years drifted by, and the town slowly forgot the details of the legend, though the ghostly figures on the old street remained. Parents told their children to steer clear, and the street faded from memory, spoken of only in hushed tones by the elderly. Yet, one storm-laden evening, a young girl named Leela, unaware of the town's dark history, found herself lost in the dense fog. She wandered onto the old street, clutching her coat tightly, her eyes wide as she felt the uncanny chill closing in around her. With each step, she sensed a presence and unnatural heaviness pressing in, as if the shadows themselves were watching her. Then, through the swirling mist, she saw them, 5 dim figures moving slowly, almost gliding along the road. Lila's heart pounded as her gaze met the eyes of one figure in particular, a worn, sorrowful man with a face half hidden in shadows, the silent wanderer, his mouth opened slightly, as if to warn her, but no sound came, only the crushing silence of the fog. Beside him, Leela saw a young woman who looked just as lost, her hand reaching out, longing for something beyond her reach. And behind them, more shadows, a boy with empty eyes, a figure clutching a diary, and, looming at the rear, the tall, wraith-like presence of the Fogbringer herself. The Fogbringer's eyes locked onto Leela, dark and endless, her silent invitation calling like a siren song. Leela felt a pull, a whisper in her mind promising to lead her home, to give her anything she desired if she would only step closer, if she would only surrender. But as she took a single hesitant step forward, she saw the silent wanderer shake his head, a flicker of desperation in his weary gaze. With his outstretched hand, he seemed to plead with her, as if he'd seen the same moment play out countless times before. His gaze bore into her, filled with a silent message of final, heartbreaking warning. Leela hesitated, tears welling in her eyes as she realized the truth. There was no escape for them. The silent wanderer, Helena, the boy, and the historian, they were all bound to this cursed street, each one lost in their own yearning, all trapped by the Fogbringer's ancient promise. In a final act of defiance, Leela broke into a run, her feet pounding the cobblestone as she fled the street, her heart racing. She ran until the fog faded, until she could no longer feel the chill of those haunted shadows reaching out for her. But when she returned to the town and tried to speak of what she had seen, no one believed her. They brushed it off as a child's nightmare, the ramblings of a frightened girl lost in the fog. And so, the memory of the silent wanderer and his tragic companions faded further, reduced to a story too unbelievable to fear. Yet, those who dared to venture onto the old street at night still swore they saw the same shadows lynch, ring, the silent wanderer and his mournful procession moving through the fog. And some claimed that if you listened closely on a misty night, you could hear the faintest whisper Lila's voice, woven with sorrow, calling softly through the mist. Asterisk, don't follow the fog. Don't follow the fog. Asterisk, but it was a warning few heard, and fewer still heeded. And the fog remained, relentless and hungry, waiting for the next lost soul to join the silent wanderer's endless march, forever bound to a curse that no one would ever break.